And we're back looking at the meta for Mythic Plus when it comes to melee DPS after, what is it, a month since we've just glimpsed the beginning of the M Plus season. And who is the winner? Who's top dog in the damage? And who fell the most at the bottom of the tiers? Let's have a look. And we're gonna start off with Arms Warrior. Now, you may not see this, but I do have our previous version of our tiers, which we're probably gonna show at the end of the video, to where Arms was initially at the beginning of the M Plus season, like a couple of days after. And now it is kind of maybe still similar, but not really. It's a little bit higher. It's gonna be in B tier this time around, but it's kind of like the bottom of the B tier. Arms Warriors are actually pretty good. They're decent. It's just not a lot of people playing them at the moment. And if I am not mistaken, some of the top arms today, as of recording this video, because all of the data from the research is basically as of recording this video, and it's 1 or 2 days before you get to see it. But the best arms are probably doing plus 12s right now across the boards. Now, not as much or as many plus 12s as other specs, and you'll see them soon in this B tier, but more so than what falls below it. But as it stands, Arms is a solid middle of the pack. And being meta extends to the security, comfort, and style of your wallet. With today's sponsor, Exter, coming in hot. Exter was founded on one big principle about quality of life: how to bring wallets to the 21st century. I'm sure you have been out of town or to a different country on vacation and had to carry your wallet around. And if you are anything like us, the wallet wasn't the only thing in your bag or pocket. And the amount of space a regular wallet takes is criminal. Exter's goal is to save you time, and when it comes to their wallet, it saves you the stress on top of it all. The wallet comes with radio frequency identification for an added layer of security, and it is trackable with your phone. Once you set up the tracker with the Chipolo app, you can see its location on your maps and ring it when you are close to find it, if it's lost in a pile of clothes or in the grass in a park somewhere. The design is really slick, and it definitely says that the 21st century landed in your pocket. In this world of convenience, having multiple cards can be a pain, but with Exter's pop-up mechanism and slim design, you can fit all of these in the palm of your hand. No more walking around with that fat wad in your pocket, literally telling everyone what's inside. As far as personal customization is concerned, it comes in a variety of colors and designs, so as to fit your own preferences. The Exter wallet is perfect for conveniently using your cards during everyday activities, and the small space it takes makes room for all of our tech we carry with us, from smartphones, headsets, multiple sets of keys, and so on. You can get yours by clicking the link in the description and using our discount code Marcelian for up to 30% off. Thanks, Exter, for sponsoring this video. Assassination, though, it is still rocking it hard, a hard A for Assassination, because it's only fitting. It's doing incredible damage, not as much as other specs, but it's still taken as the best rogues. Oh my god, am I spoiling it for the rest of the rogue specs? The best rogue specs, listen, cat's out of the bag. It is doing the best. I don't know if that's necessarily surprising, because that was true for our initial review of Assassination when we did the tier list about a month ago. It hasn't necessarily changed. It's still a really good rogue spec, and I think probably the biggest reason is why also Mage is a very good class and spec to bring into Mythic Plus is because of its funnel damage, or its priority target damage, which it excels at, as true with a lot of other specs on this tier list. Plus, it just does really big damage. One of the best melees in the game, period. And I kind of want to say the same for Outlaw, but it's not really. So Outlaw is going to go into B tier, and because I will put Outlaw into B tier, I do want to remind everybody that Arms is not actually a B tier spec. Ha! It's actually a C tier spec. There's quite a bit of difference between Outlaw and Arms, where Outlaw, I think some of the logs that you might see on the screen sees Outlaw doing even more damage than some of the Assassination ones that we've taken a look at. So it could be a point where Outlaw is seeing a resurgence. Outlaw has never had necessarily bad damage. This season it was just very wonky to play, and I think people just naturally gravitated towards Assassination a little bit more. But judging by the pure numbers, and obviously this is not indicative of all of the Outlaws' performance and all of the Assassination's performance. Obviously, people play differently at different levels, and this is only just a couple of logs. You know, don't take this, you know, as the Bible, as, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. Outlaw is doing numerically a little bit better than most other specs, but it is a B tier in terms of like how many high keys it has cleared compared to everybody else, because even though I bumped arms into C tier, remember that arms is actually doing plus 12s at the moment. So C tier is a plus 12. Are you doing a plus 12? No, because I know people have a problem with ranking specs that do so high keys so low, but if we wouldn't do that, then they would probably all be like A tier and a few in S tier, right? So, and that's just boring, right? There's a little bit of a difference between them, and that's true for survival as well. And it's actually a bigger difference between survival and arms, but survival cannot really go down into D tier this yet, unfortunately. It is, I think, one of the specs that has dropped the most from our previous tier list, but it's just not scaling that well. And I know in what, 2 weeks time, survival is gonna get a bunch of cool new stuff in the 11.05 anniversary patch, with some changes to butchery, some changes to merciless blows, and how you're doing your AoE, plus seeing as how Ruthless Marauder is now a 1-point investment, maybe you'll get to play Fury of the Eagle in higher keys, although I probably doubt that a little bit, considering that higher keys kind of reward a little bit more dot playstyle, a little bit more longer funnel type damage playstyle, which Fury of the Eagle is just pure burst. But with the reworks, who knows? Until then, survival has really good damage, don't get me wrong, it's just not pushing as high. I don't know if that's just because it is numerically capped in terms of its overall performance, or if it's a little bit squishier. Hunters are notoriously, I want to say squishy, but considering that Dark Ranger for the other Hunter specs brings a really killer defensive talent, which nobody plays because everybody's playing Sentinel. I think BM actually might be playing Dark Ranger, but nobody plays BM anyway. The Hunter is just in a weird spot, okay? But yes, listen, until then, it's gonna be C tier. We'll revise this in about, I don't know, I guess a month or so, and see where they sit at. Since Enhancement is crushing it, might I add, all the way into A tier. From certain perspectives, I kind of want to put Enhance above Assassination, but I will maintain the consistency of ranking these specs in the way of how high they have cleared, what's the overall top score for the best players of each spec. So it is A tier. It's, you know, listen, all of the A tier specs, Assassination and Enhancement as well, considering everything else that's gonna be in A tier as well, are pretty much S tier contenders. There's a reason why they're not S tier, and we'll get to that in a second. But until then, Enhancement is actually really good. Probably better than Elemental statistically, but since we're not, you know, looking at range at all, at the moment, we only, you know, are ranking melees against each other. The Enhancement is a really solid spec, has a really good kick. Shaman in general is a very good class this season with the curse and poison the spells that you bring to your team. Bloodlust, of course, which is probably not a big problem if you're pushing high keys, since most of the high keys are done with an augmentation evoker anyway, so you're never not gonna have Bloodlust or, you know, similar effects. But the dispels are actually very important, where you might actually decide to take an enhancement as a melee if you don't have a Restoration Shaman, for instance. My voice is cracking a little bit. It's been a long day. It hasn't. It's actually very early in the morning, and I just finished my coffee. Speaking of finishing your thing, Feral has finished climbing. It actually dropped from our last year. It is currently into C tier. I actually have some data here on this laptop, which you might see why I'm kind of turning my head every now and again. It's not getting a lot of representation, to be fair, considering that Balanced Druid is just cranking the numbers right now, and I probably bet that most Balanced Druids would rather play Feral if they had a choice, but they don't, because Feral is kind of like the, I want to say, loser of the Druid class, but I don't know how it sits with Restoration. Maybe it's a little bit better than Restoration in terms of keys that it clears. Feral has quite a bit of damage. I mean, we've played with some of the Ferals that are just cranking the millions overalls and even the lower keys, and that's pretty good to see. It's just not pushing anything higher. And even though, like I said, this is C tier. C tier is not necessarily bad. It's, you know, 11s and 12s. That's where it kind of sits. I think there are Ferals that are clearing 12s. I mean, you'll see it on the screen. I've looked at like dozens and dozens of keys. I don't remember exactly who's where and what, but you get to see it, so you know why. Feral is around C tier. I don't know if that's gonna change. 1105 isn't bringing anything to Feral. The buffs that are kind of every now and again popping to Feral, they're not, you know, turning any heads or making any big change. So this is where it's gonna be. Now, Frost Death Knight, completely ruining the rest of this tier set, is going all the way into S tier. I actually didn't want Frost DK to be into S tier, and I wanted essentially most, if not all of the A tier to also be into S tier, but Frost DK is just a little bit above everybody else, because if I believe correctly, Frost Death Knight, as of recording this video, is the only melee spec that has cleared the first plus 14. I believe it's Mists of Tyrna Scythe. Now, I don't know the details of how that key got cleared, what the conditions were, how likely it is for other specs to also clear it. That doesn't matter, because you can always have exceptions and parentheses, and but listen, they only did it because, well, it doesn't matter. It did it. It cleared a plus 14 and is the only one, hence why it's going into S tier. Frost DK has been kind of like the best melee DPS spec throughout this entire season, probably, which is great. Listen, that's great. We don't really see Frost Death Knight do this almost ever. I don't remember ever seeing Frost DK ever be into A tier, let alone S tier, so they deserve it, okay? Stop hitting on the Frost Death Knights. They've worked a long time being an underdog and a shit spec to becoming where they are today. So let them enjoy the light in the sun. It's not gonna last, we all know that. But until then, it's gonna bask in the glory of the S tier, the best spec in the game. Also, it's cranking giga numbers, dude. 1.8 millions overall across the board in some of the logs that we've been able to access. Keep in mind that although we're showing you the performance of some of these specs on screen that we've managed to snag off of Warcraft logs, not everybody's logging their keys, and some of the highest keys, obviously the 14 is not here, some of the highest keys are not even logged at all, which is criminal, because we want to know how these things are possible. But of course, you know, the top dogs are not going to, you know, show their hand to everybody, especially if, you know, MDI is around the corner-ish, and they want to, you know, kind of keep this on the wraps, although usually these things don't remain secret for a very long time. But Frost DK, S tier, good. Now, Fury Warrior actually dropped a tier from last time and is going into B tier, most likely because of the nerfs, because Fury is still obviously the best warrior DPS spec, not the best warrior spec, considering that Prot Warrior is cranking hard at the moment, probably harder than Fury. Fury is a weird situation. We are also undergoing a video on Fury regarding on how it's performing with all of the nerfs and how it feels right now. It is in an unfortunate situation where it has been nerfed, and I don't think it was deserving of all of those nerfs. And the problem with Fury, that's most likely keeping it from being an A tier, because overall the damage is not bad. Fury is still doing a lot of damage, but its single target is atrocious. That would be my guess as to why people are not using Fury to climb higher and why Fury is not making it into the A tier. The boss damage is atrocious. Until we see some changes to Fury, and 1105 doesn't bring that, even though we have seen buffs to Raging Blow and Bloodthirst, that I don't think that affects Fury that much. It might increase, I believe, from some of my very scuffed, failed at my class math. It's probably about 2% single target increase in single target fights, and that's not Mythic Plus, because you're not actually using Raging Blow and Bloodthirst all that much, because you're using Crushing Blow and Bloodbath. So I don't know how those buffs are going to help Fury, or if they will help it at all, but until then it's gonna be a solid B tier. Still better than Havoc Demon Hunter. Also not a particularly bad spec. Listen, the B tier specs are clearing plus 13s, not across the board, but they're getting there, right? They're getting there, and Havoc is no exception as well. I want to say this is the better Demon Hunter spec that you take, but there are some Vengeance that are doing some gnarly stuff out there. You might not see Vengeance that much. You might see Bears more. You might see Prot Warriors more than Vengeance. So bringing a Havoc as your next ideal spec is probably good. It does decent damage. It has obviously uncapped AoE with Felscard. If it remains that way, it might even climb higher, even though it kind of dropped from the beginning of the season. So that's a little bit, you know, paradoxical, oxymoronical. I'm a moron. Either way, until we can actually pull 3 packs or more consistently in dungeons, I don't think Havoc is going to see any rise. I mean, defensively, it's probably fine. It has some decent utility, but in terms of damage output, its main selling point is its uncapped little bursty AoE damage, but I don't know if you're going to be able to take much advantage of that. Red has also dropped a little bit, so actually a little bit more. and it's at the bottom of the B tier. This was a hard one to rank considering that red is just consistent. Like over the course of this video, you probably see like the top players of each spec on Radar.io ranked by their score, by their keys cleared. And sometimes you see a big difference between rank 1 and rank 10 in terms of their overall score. You don't see that much difference with red. Red is just consistently solid, but it's just not consistently clearing higher keys. I don't think red has done any plus 13s at this point. Maybe there's like one done in time, which is a little bit different from the other B tiers. But red is just, I mean, paladin is a really good class. Red, as of this moment, red is the best paladin spec, but I am talking just after the reset where the buffs to prot and holy have kicked in, and I don't think we have enough data to judge most likely holy paladin. I don't think prot paladin is gonna, you know, turn any heads anytime soon. But until then, red paladin is probably going to be your ideal paladin spec if you want a paladin in a dungeon because of, you know, the poison dispels, because of the immunes. Oh my god, I'm thinking Grim Botol, which is actually statistically the hardest dungeon as of this moment to push into. Having that bubble immune to clear the tentacles. Oh, that's so good. Even though you might be able to also deal with spell warding, and that's not a red paladin thing. So who knows? Prop paladin, please. B tier. Subtlety Rogue. Subtlety Rogue is a sad, sad story. It's actually the worst melee spec in the game at the moment in terms of Mythic Plus. Be that as it may, it is clearing plus 11s. It's not clearing plus 12s as of this moment, I don't think. Wait a minute. I'm not going to recall from memory. I will actually read it off of the notes that I have here. So the top Subtlety Rogues have no plus 12s, no, just full on 11s. By the time you see this, there might be a Subtlety Rogue that's cranking maybe a plus 12 mists or something like that, which is so far statistically the easiest dungeons to push high keys in from what we've seen from all the top specs. But until then, it is just actually the worst. But even so, like I'm saying, like if you see subtlety into D tier, don't lose your marbles. It's doing plus 11s. That's way higher. Like we've managed to just do our plus 10 and not in time. And yeah, we cannot really try sub that much. But it is unfortunately a bad spec. And if I'm not mistaken, was there a black powder fat buff announced? I don't know if it hit live service. It definitely didn't hit it before doing this video. But if that goes live, unless I've had a dream about it, that black powder was buffed by 35%. Imagine that. Subtlety Rogues, they might actually jump all the way to B tier. Who knows? But until then, D tier it is. Unholy has actually been rising. This has been the most pleasant surprise ever. So close to making it into A tier. If you look at the pure numbers, it's actually giving Frost Death Knight a run for its money. It's one of the best DPSer melee specs out in the game. Now, I don't know why it's not overtaken or, you know, equal in terms of performance with Frost Death Knight. It's likely that people just didn't have time to bring it up that way. But if you look at the top keys cleared by everybody in Mythic Plus right now, there's definitely some Unholy Death Knights in the top 10, 20-ish of people clearing keys. What I'm trying to say is that we're probably going to see Unholy rise higher and higher and higher, maybe even equal Frost in terms of overall performance. We'll see how that plays out in the end, but Unholy is just a really good spec, and I know this because I play with one in my keys, and motherfucker just doesn't let me ever have a good time on the meters, man. I'm telling you. But be that as it may, A tier is pretty solid considering that in the start of the season, we ranked it all the way into B tier. And last but not least, Windwalker, unfortunately, has also dropped. Not too much, but it is, you know, a little bit behind Arms at this moment. I don't have much to say about Windwalker, to be fair. It's doing surprisingly high amounts of damage, actually way better than what we predicted from beta. Not as much as at the beginning. I think it's the same situation as Survival. Maybe it's not scaling as great with the gear as the other specs are, considering that at the beginning of the season, some of the rankings that we did were probably coming from people not actually even having full tier set at that point. So maybe that's just how it is. Maybe that's just the story. I mean, obviously Windwalker is a pretty good spec. It's doing 11s, 12s at this moment, which is not bad. All things considered, it is maybe one of the better monk specs to bring. I'm not too sure where Mistweaver is. I haven't looked at healers just yet, but it's definitely better than Brewmaster, that's for sure. And it's gotten a lot of buff. I believe Shadow Pan has had quite a few changes recently, so we might even see it higher. But as of this moment, everybody's essentially kind of getting buffs, so I don't know if Windwalker will keep up with everybody. And like I mentioned earlier, this is the initial ranking that we've had at the beginning of the season, where pretty much everybody was doing pretty well, but it was, you know, the start. And once people got gear, some specs climbed higher, some specs dropped lower. You know how it is. That is the actual story, and survival is one of the ones that dropped the lowest. And speaking of, you should check our survival video, because it does go into why survival is actually right now the least popular spec in the game and one of the worst melees in the game. Close. And that's weird, because obviously from the ranking it doesn't show that, but it's not that far off actually. It's very close to being the worst melee in the game. But is it though? You'll have to watch the video to find out.